So you could probably join me, whatever your political choice, in the last election in saying that the war of words that comes out of Washington, D.C. has not abated in the last couple of months. It seems to have ramped up in very many ways. And I will talk about our current president in this context, and you'll hear me say this in a couple of minutes, that we can find things that every president that has served this country has said which was not the truth, which was at least a fabrication of facts or may have been their own narrative around facts. But I get concerned when I have what I consider to be the potential for a political leader and a potential spiritual leader in our country. And I hold presidents to that high bar, as I hold myself, as I hold anyone in leadership, who seems to lose the power of words in a tweet or some other social media communication. You know, it's interesting that in 1987, when Donald Trump wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, he talked about the importance of using truthful hyperbole, which means taking the facts and then overstating them, exaggerating them to get a maximum effect from people. And I don't think it takes us, if we've watched anything that's been going on in the last 2 years, to say that he's very good at that. What bothers me is not hyperbole. It's how we kind of distort facts or play facts in our own direction or believe what we want to believe. And mostly I see places where Mr. Trump, and I pray for him every day, has distorted facts in order to play up to one agenda. Now, the truth is, he's not the only president that's ever done that. I was thinking back, you go through President Obama's, President Bush's, President Clinton. We won't even go there tonight. And go back to Ronald Reagan, H.W. Bush. I mean, you could go back to Nixon. Now, I'm indicting myself. But we can all agree that, for me, it's discouraging when we have leaders of our country who do not set the same bar for themselves that they invite others to walk into. And we got to admit, media sources are not guiltless in this. We've seen some media sources that have chosen to pass along fake news, and there's a variety of different ones, both the alternative ones and the ones we might watch every week. And there are media sources that probably haven't done the kind of investigating and background checks that they need to do and really write a story out before they bring it up. And sometimes that's our fault. Because when we see something on our Facebook, man, we're clicking in, aren't we? When we see something that maybe agrees with our point of view, then we're sharing that. Even though we haven't checked to see whether the information we have seen is really true or factual. And I spend way too much time on Facebook trying to investigate that than I do sharing. I'm just enough old school to want our leaders to somehow invite us to raise our standards rather than lowering them. And to remember, whether we're President of the United States, Vice President, whether a leader in our congregation or a leader in your family, words matter. Words matter. They're powerful. They shape perceptions. They shape reflection. They shape self-understanding. There's a great story that Larry Crabb wrote in his book, Connecting, about a friend of his who talked about when he grew up. At his mealtime, it was a very stressful time, because if you did anything wrong at their table, in this case, his father would come down on you as hard as a rock. You spilled something. There was something wrong with you. Get up and clean it up. What's wrong with you? And he used to talk about his friend would go from his house out of the dinner table as soon as he could and go to the house of his friend 2 houses down and slide under the house in order to hear the conversations around the dinner table, because they were so different than his own. Of parents, and in this case a father, because that's the connection, who was supportive, who when kids spilled The water around the table didn't erupt in anger or abuse, but instead erupted in understanding. Said, that's fine, just clean it up. Let's have another water here. As if there was this abundant generosity. Words matter. Larry Crabb in his book Connecting says, what matters about words is what they start to pour into the heart of another person. And he kind of begins to break it down in this way. He says that, words are words that, he goes back to the beginning. God created humankind and God said, I made them in my image. Which means there's something in every person, as hard as it can be to find sometimes, as hard as it might be for me to see in myself, in every person that carries with us the light of God, the seed of God's goodness. And he says, sometimes what happens is we get so busy, we get so full of life, we get so full of stuff that this stuff starts to cloud our lives. And it doesn't keep the light from shining, but it sure makes it hard for others to see, doesn't it? We get so busy, our schedules get racked up. We don't leave time for God. We don't leave time for family around the table. We don't leave time for the kind of vision casting that families can do just around the table or at the bed or at the bedside at bedtime. We can get so busy that the light doesn't stop shining, but boy, its glow is diminished. Or maybe sometimes some of us feel like there's just a lot of junk in our lives. Maybe it's a childhood experience. Maybe it's the way you were treated. Maybe it's some choices you've made that make you feel unlovable. And it's like someone has just backfilled a bunch of dirt on the light in your heart. And you're wondering, who could love me there? Who could love me there? And what Mr. Crabb wants us to know is this doesn't keep God from loving any of us at all. In fact, he said God sometimes will move to kind of try to clear some of that dirt. But other times God I'm not going to do it now because I'll get it all over. Take a big picture of life-giving water and pour it into us to clean some of that stuff away. Doesn't mean it doesn't all go away, but it means that's not what defines you. That's not what makes you who you are in the love of God. And the question he asks us is, when we think about the power of our words, what is our words shaping in the lives of other people? Children, teenagers, our spouses, our partners, our loved ones. Are your words creating life, building someone up, or are they tearing someone down? See, our words cast a vision. Our words cast a vision. A vision in your children of who they might become. A vision in your relationship of what that could become. Your words can build up, and your words can tear down. It matters. Words have power. Larry Crabb says that when God pours God's life into us, we'll go to that quote, please, Rich. By the way, let's stop there for a minute. We talked about these values a couple of weeks ago, right? God-honoring values. We had a whole big list of them, and they're on either side. And imagine our lives if we were taking these values and focusing our lives on them, maybe for Lent, and pouring them into the life of other people. Imagine what the world would be like, one life at a time. But you pour that into one life, and they know 3 other lives, and guess what happens? Those 3, and then those 3 people know 3 more, and it begins to multiply. Imagine what happens. Let's go to the quote, please, Rich. Next one. There we go. God pours God's life into us, he says, restoring our capacity to connect first with God and then with others. God makes us alive, he says, with the actual presence of Christ. Restores us to a place. The energy, he says, when we accept that gift, when we allow the presence of Christ in our lives, he says, the energy with which Jesus lived, The impulses that lay behind everything he did, his tenderness with the lame man, his indignation with the money changers, his patience with Philip, his red-hot scorn of the Pharisees who saw only law and not very little love, his love for children, his resolve to endure injustice without complaint. He says that when we allow Christ in our lives, the impulse that energized Jesus' life on earth are actually poured out into us. That's part of what it means to be alive in Christ. Think about that. Think about that. When we seek to take these values, this orientation, this faith, wherever we are in our journey, this hope that lives in us, and it comes in us, then that life that energized Jesus begins to energize our lives too. And then you take what God has given you and you start pouring that into the life of someone else. And look out, my friends. Words have power because words cast a vision in another person's heart of who they can be as much as who they can't be, depending on the words that are poured out in someone else's heart. I mean, what would it be like if we had a vision for each other? If we could see in each other... Where did I put that? Okay, I lost my... There it is. What if we could see in each other the glory that we thought was lost in ourselves, in our families, in our friends? What would be the effect on our sons and daughters, on our loved ones, on our friendship, if we realized that we were caught up with the possibilities of a life restored in glory and hope, of what a person could become? Our words shape the vision. You ask any teacher, who would tell you that what they say can sometimes stay with a student for years. How are you doing at your vision casting from the words you share? Now, I know with kids, we need discipline. We need boundaries. Kids need to learn things that are healthy. Things need to learn lessons that help them move towards God-honoring values, whether some of the other things that can be self-destructive or family-destructive or community-destructive. But even that discipline should not just be about punishment, as it is a movement towards restoring them and moving them towards the things that give life. How are you doing at vision casting? I mean, studies continue to show the dinner table is the number one place in the human family where we can shape the lives and attitudes and mores of our children and our loved ones. How about bedtime? Do you pray at bedtime with your kids? Do you read at bedtime with your kids? Imagine the vision casting you do by spending that time with them. Which brings us to two questions. Run back to the next one, Rich. Back up one. Another one. No, back up again. What is the vision you are pouring into someone else's life with your words? But I think there's a bigger question. Because I think we get the importance of pouring a vision of who we are and the love of God into the lives of the things that really matter. But here's a question, I think, for us as we move into this season of Lent. Is what are you allowing God to pour into your life? Because we can pour into someone's lives all we want, but if that's not being refreshed and renewed and reinvigorated by the love and presence of God, for me, that's the power of worship. For me, that's the power of small groups. That's the power of a simple 10 or 15-minute devotional time. It's opening our hearts so that God can pour God's love in us, so that His Word lives through us in the lives of others. So what's your challenge for this season that will help you open your heart to God to fill your vessel, so that the words you use will cast a vision in the life of someone else. Let us pray. Lord, all around us we see words, we hear words, we feel them sometimes. There are words passed on social media. There are words shared over a phone. There are words shared in so many ways. And some of them tear us down and don't call us to our best version of ourselves. Help us, oh God, to focus on the words that build up rather than tear down. The words that see the possibility of a Christ-like presence, however hard to see in the moment in the life of another, that we may cast a vision of your hope in their lives. And help us see in our children and our teenagers and our loved ones your God-given possibility. Help us know that our words have power as they cast a vision of your love into this creation. And all God's people said. Amen.